The flicker of 65 candles cast dancing shadows across the cramped, oil-stained garage I called home. "Make a wish, Mom," Blaine said, his millionaire smile a jarring contrast to my reality. "I'm just so happy you're comfortable here." Beside him, Celine's wineglass shattered, the crimson spill on the concrete mirroring the shock in my heart. But it was the flicker of recognition in her eyes, not surprise, that made me whisper, "Son, I live in the garage." The cold truth hung heavy in the air, a silent accusation against the daughter who had known all along. And as Blaine's face drained of color, I knew the real battle for my life had only just begun. You here follow my story until the end and comment the city you're watching from so I can see how far my story has. The soft light from the candles shimmered over the cake, flickering shadows across the makeshift dining table, nestled between forgotten storage bins and dusty toolboxes. 65 candles, one for every year of my life, struggled to stay lit against the slight draft that crept through the poorly insulated walls of what my son so confidently called my apartment. Blaine beamed at me from across the table, his million-dollar smile just as polished as the cufflinks gleaming on his tailored suit. "Make a wish, Mom," he said warmly, clearly proud of himself. I tried to smile back, swallowing the ache in my throat. The cold from the concrete floor seeped through the threadbare rug I'd picked up at a garage sale, stinging my feet despite the socks. Sitting next to Blaine was my daughter, Seline, her elegantly manicured nails drumming an impatient rhythm against her wineglass. At 38, she had perfected her icy beauty, Botox smoothing every emotion from her face, but not her eyes. Her eyes were busy, constantly flicking to her phone, calculating something even now. She'd checked it 3 times in the last 10 minutes. "This is lovely, darling," I said softly, forcing my voice into cheerfulness. "Thank you both for coming." Blaine reached across the table to gently squeeze my hand, the light catching on his wedding ring, likely worth more than my entire wardrobe. "Mom, you know how much I love you. I just wanted to make sure you were comfortable here. When I bought this place for you, I made sure it had everything you needed." Those words struck me like a blow. Everything I needed. I let my eyes wander over the space that had become my entire world these past 3 years. The narrow cot pressed against the wall, the dented hot plate sitting on a makeshift counter, the ancient space heater in the corner that barely worked during the winter months, and the lone window that looked out over an alley where garbage trucks clattered by at dawn. "Blaine," I said quietly, my voice barely more than a breath. "Son, I live in the garage." Celine's wineglass slipped from her hand and shattered on the floor, red liquid spreading across the concrete like spilled blood. But it wasn't the sound of breaking glass that made my heart lurch. It was the expression that crossed her face. Not surprise, not confusion, recognition. She had known. She had always known. Blaine's complexion went pale. "What? No, Mom. This is the apartment. The garage apartment. It's separate from the main house, fully independent." I slowly rose to my feet, my joints stiff with age and aching from the cold. "Sweetheart, look around, really look." I motioned toward the walls where rusted tools still hung, remnants from the previous owner. The large oil stain on the floor that no amount of scrubbing could lift. The heavy garage door now hidden behind a tapestry I'd hung just to cut the chill. "The realtor," Blaine started, but his voice faltered as his gaze began to actually take in the room. The exposed water heater clunking in the corner. The lack of any real insulation. The one electrical outlet that powered everything from my lamp to my little heater. 3 years, I said, the strength returning to my voice. "I've been living in this garage for 3 years. And you believed this was an apartment." Seline had crouched to gather the shards of her broken wineglass, but I could see her eyes darting between her brother and me, measuring our emotions, calculating her next move. "Mom, I don't understand," Blaine said, raking his perfectly styled fingers through his hair. "The listing said garage apartment. The photos, they showed a renovated space. You never said anything." That hit deeper than anything else. That I had never said anything. For 3 long years, I'd smiled and nodded, told myself to be grateful. Grateful that my wealthy son had thought enough of me to give me shelter. Grateful that I wasn't out on the street at 65. I'd convinced myself that I should accept what I was given. That love, at least in our family, came with unspoken conditions. "I didn't want to seem ungrateful," I said, sinking back into my chair. "You were so proud when you handed me the keys. You said you'd found the perfect place. I thought I thought that this was what you believed I deserved. The silence that followed felt endless. I could hear Seline breathing, quick, sharp, shallow. Blaine stared blankly at the cake, the gears clearly turning in his head, trying to process it all. But the heating bills, he said suddenly. I've been paying expensive heating bills for this address. I let out a quiet breath. Those bills are innate for this place, son. There's no central heat here, just that little space heater. I pointed at the small, buzzing unit near my cot. The bills you've been paying? They're for the main house. His brow furrowed. The main house? Seline finally spoke, her voice high and tight. The main house has been empty, Blaine, since Mom moved in here. I assumed you knew that. But her tone betrayed her. She hadn't assumed, She knew he didn't know, and worse, she had ensured he didn't. Seline, Blaine turned to her, something darker creeping into his voice now. You're in charge of managing all the properties. You told me you were making sure Mom was comfortable. You said you were checking in on her. I have been checking in on her, she said coolly, brushing glass from her designer dress as she stood. She seemed fine. Haven't you, Mom? The challenge in her voice was unmistakable. For years, I'd told myself stories to survive, that this was temporary, that they loved me, just in a different way, that perhaps I was asking too much to expect more. But looking into Celine's cold, composed face, I felt something shatter inside me. This wasn't a mistake. It had never been a misunderstanding. She had done this on purpose. How long have you known? I asked her, my voice more solid than I expected. Known what? She replied smoothly, but her eyes flicked away from mine, just for a second. How long have you known I've been living in a garage while your brother believed he was giving me a proper home? The candles had burned low, leaving wax puddled on the cake's surface. No one had touched a slice. Across the room, a photo of my grandson smiled from the nightstand, a boy I hardly knew because visits were always too complicated. Blaine was staring at his sister now. I could see it, the pieces falling into place. The moment everything clicked into place, Seline. But deep down, I had already known. I saw it in the way she squared her shoulders, bracing herself like a soldier ready to face a war she had long anticipated. I saw it in the slight, stubborn lift of her chin. She had known all along, and worse, that knowledge had been exactly what she wanted. The confrontation with Seline would have to wait. That night, after my children left, Blaine visibly rattled and struggling to process. Seline cold, distant, and composed. I was left alone with memories I'd spent years burying. I sat down on my narrow cot, pulling a threadbare blanket tightly around my shoulders, and allowed myself to remember. Really remember. No more protective filters, no more rationalizing, just the truth in all its painful clarity. It had started when Blaine turned 18 and Seline was 16. Harold had already been gone for 2 years by then, and the life insurance money was dwindling fast. I was juggling 3 pubs, cleaning office buildings at night, stocking shelves at the supermarket during the day, and watching neighborhood children on the weekends. But no matter how hard I worked, it was never enough. Blaine had been accepted into Harvard. My brilliant boy, the first in our family to even dare to dream that big. His acceptance letter sat untouched on our chip kitchen table for weeks, a symbol of both hope and the impossible. Mom, I can take out loans, he said gently, trying to ease my burden, but I could see the unease in his eyes. He knew what debt could do to a person. He had watched me struggle under its weight since the day we buried his father. No, I told him firmly. You're going to Harvard, and you're going to graduate without owing a single cent. So I sold the house, our beautiful family home, the one where I had brought both my children home from the hospital, where Harold and I used to slow dance in the kitchen on quiet nights, where we had marked every inch of Blaine and Celine's childhood heights into the wood of the doorframe year after year. I sold it all. The realtor had called it a seller's market, but even after settling the remaining mortgage and Harold's hospital bills, the proceeds barely covered Blaine's tuition in a small, modest apartment for Seline and me. It's temporary, I reassured her as we packed our lives into cardboard boxes, just until Blaine graduates and finds his footing. Seline was livid. At 16, she was old enough to understand what we were losing, but still too young to grasp why it had to be done. She blamed me as though I had a choice. All my friends live in actual houses, she screamed during one of our arguments in the cramped 2-bedroom unit. I'm too embarrassed to invite anyone over. I had been pulling double shifts just to save for her senior year, Her prom dress, her photos, her graduation party. I wanted her to have all the things her friends had, even if it meant I was surviving on peanut butter sandwiches most nights. When Blaine finally graduated, summa cum laude no less, with multiple job offers from top firms, I cried with joy so pure it shocked me. Every sacrifice, every sleepless night, every dollar stretched to its breaking point, it had all been worth it. "My turn now, Mom," Blaine had said that day, standing tall in his graduation cap and gown in our tiny living room. "Let me take care of you and Seline. I'll make sure you never have to worry again." And he meant it. Blaine's career skyrocketed. Within 5 years, he was a partner. Within 10, he launched his own company. By 35, he was worth more money than I could ever wrap my mind around. But somewhere along the way, Seline had quietly slipped into the space between us. It started subtly. After college, she moved to Blaine City and got a marketing job that paid well enough for most, but apparently not for her lifestyle. She began managing things for her brother. "Blaine's swamped," she'd tell me on the phone. "I help with the logistics so he can focus on work." At the time, I'd been touched by her sense of responsibility. I didn't realize then what logistics actually meant. Now I do. It meant me. When I started falling behind on rent, Seline was the one who gently suggested, "Maybe it's time to think about something more age-appropriate, Mom." When I told her I was struggling to pay for my medications, she reassured me, "Don't worry, I'll talk to Blaine about it." When I confided how lonely I was, living alone for the first time in my life, she promised to find a solution that works for everyone. That solution turned out to be the garage. "Blaine found you the perfect place," she said one day, arriving at my apartment with keys and papers. "It's in a great neighborhood, no rent, no utility bills. He's covering everything. You don't have to worry about a thing." I had been overwhelmed with gratitude. I thought, what a thoughtful son I've raised. He's taking care of his aging mother. Seline drove me there herself. She walked me through the space, pointing out the exposed brick, the so-called charm, the convenient location. "It's perfect for you, Mom," she said brightly. "Low maintenance, simple, and Blaine's thrilled to do this for you." I trusted her. Of course I did. She was my daughter. But sitting here now, in this cold, converted garage at 65, I can see it all clearly. Every time Blaine had tried to do more for me, merely, I remember me, and I'm sure now that he did, Seline had intercepted, twisted, filtered his intentions to fit her own plans. The heating bills he mentioned, those had gone toward the main house, the one sitting empty next door. Had Seline told him I was living there? Had she taken the money meant for my comfort and used it elsewhere? My phone buzzed. A message from Blaine. "Mom, I need to understand what happened. Can we talk tomorrow?" Before I could respond, another message arrived. This one from Seline. "I hope you're happy. You've really upset Blaine with your dramatics." Dramatics. Living in a garage for 3 years was dramatics. I set the phone down and walked over to the small mirror I'd hung beside my makeshift sink. The woman staring back at me looked older than her years. Gray hair, thinning and uneven from too many self-administered haircuts. Clothes clean but faded, a face lined with worry and weariness. But her eyes were finally open. For 3 years, I told myself this was temporary, that Blaine was just busy building his empire, that eventually he'd notice something was off, that Seline was simply protecting his interests, that I should be grateful for what I had. But I had been living a lie, a story I wanted to believe, that my daughter was coordinating my care out of love, that my son was supporting me based on a true understanding of my needs, that I was aging with grace, with dignity, accepting help in a way that was natural and fair. But the real story was much darker, more tangled, far more painful. Would try to call or visit, you redirected him. You filtered every interaction, deciding what he should know and when, if ever. And when he sent money, you made sure it went where you wanted, not where it was intended. Seline didn't deny it. She simply crossed her arms, her expression hard. "I did what had to be done," she said flatly. Blaine stepped away from her, shaking his head slowly. "You used me," he said. His voice wasn't angry, it was hollow, like something inside him had cracked. "You used my money, my trust, and worst of all, you used Mom. You let her live in a damn garage while you played house in here like some suburban queen." "I gave her a place to live," Seline snapped. "She had heat, a bed, coffee, in a storage room," I said quietly, "while you lived in the house your brother gave me, with the money meant to support me." "How long did you think this would stay hidden, Seline?" I didn't plan on hiding anything, she said. I planned on keeping this family functioning. No, Blaine replied sharply. You planned on keeping control. That silenced her. For a moment, no one spoke. The air in the room felt thick with something ugly and old, like mold that had been growing unseen for years. This wasn't just about a house. It was about a system. One Seline had built piece by piece, excuse by excuse. And we had all let her do it, me by staying quiet, Blaine by staying distant. Seline tried one last time. I was the one who stayed. I was the one who picked up the phone when she cried at night. I took care of everything. You isolated her, Blaine cut in. You made sure I never knew. That's not care, that's control. Seline looked like she'd been slapped. I need you to leave, he said, now. What? Blaine, you can't. This is my house. No, it's not. His voice was like steel now. You've been squatting in a house you had no right to. You lied to me. You took advantage of Mom, and now you're done. I don't have anywhere to go, she said, her voice small now. You'll figure it out, Blaine replied, like Mom did, with far less. She didn't argue again. Her eyes moved around the room as if seeing it differently now. Then she turned and left. The door clicked shut behind her. We watched through the window as she got into her car, still parked behind Blaine's. The BMW that had once seemed impressive now looked out of place, like a costume on the wrong actor. When the car pulled away, Blaine turned to me. He looked like he had aged 10 years, but there was something else there too, resolve. I'm so sorry, Mom, he said. I should have seen it. I should have asked more questions. You trusted her, I said. So did I. But it ends now, he said. I'm moving you into the main house today. No more hiding, no more pretending. I don't need much, I murmured. You deserve more than not much, he said. You deserve to be comfortable, safe, respected. I looked at him, really looked, and saw the man he had become, a son who had been blind but was now wide awake. And for the first time in years, I felt something unfamiliar warming the cold places inside me. Hope. He tried to call me directly. He tried to visit. He wanted to do more for me, and every time Seline stood in the way. She never said a word in response, but her silence said everything. The Christmas gift, Blaine said suddenly. Last year, I ordered that high-end heating system for your armature, told Seline to have it installed here. I blinked. I never got anything like that. I never received it, I said, looking around at the house that was supposed to be mine, with its climate control and sleek, modern comfort, all of it carefully tailored for me. Where is it, Seline? Seline was quick, too quick. Mom's house didn't need that kind of upgrade, so I had it installed here instead for when she visits. When she visits, Blaine's voice cracked with disbelief. This was supposed to be her home, but I wasn't only thinking about the heating system. I was thinking about all the other things that never came. The care packages Blaine said he'd sent, the specialist appointments he'd supposedly scheduled, the grocery service he thought I was getting. All of it, filtered through Seline, all of it, intercepted, redirected, downsized, or simply kept for herself. How long? I asked, my voice quiet but razor sharp. How long have you been stealing from us? I didn't steal anything, she snapped, bristling with indignation. I've been managing family resources responsibly. Mom doesn't need that much. And Blaine, you've got more money than you know what to do with. I was just making sure nothing went to waste. Wasted. That word landed like a slap. That's how she saw caring for me. As a waste, a drain, an inefficient use of funds. I saw Blaine walk slowly to the window. He stared silently at the well-tended garden below. Flowers in bloom, hedges neatly trimmed, not a weed in sight. Likely maintained by a service he thought I was enjoying. I need to ask you something, he said without turning around. Did you ever tell Mom about the trust fund? My breath hitched in my chest. What trust fund? Seline went pale. The one I set up 3 years ago, Blaine continued, his back still to us. $50,000 a year for Mom's expenses, housing, healthcare, everything. I told you to help her access it. I asked you to walk her through it. He turned around slowly. Seline, please tell me you told her. The silence stretched, long, thick, suffocating. And in that silence, the truth unfurled, raw and undeniable. She hadn't just taken a house. She hadn't just cut me off from my own son. She had stolen 3 full years of safety, 3 years of stability Blaine had tried to provide me. While I scraped by on Social Security, she lived well, Off money meant for me. Seline, Blaine said, his voice tight with fury, barely restrained. Where's the money? The air shifted. His question hung heavy between us like a blade suspended mid-drop. Seline stood frozen in the middle of the pristine living room. My living room. Her eyes darted wildly, face contorted as if warring with itself. Defiance, fear, cold calculation. Then finally something closer to rage. You have no idea the costs involved in managing all this, she burst out, gesturing around her. The house upkeep, the utilities, the taxes, the effort it takes to coordinate Mom's care. Do you know how many hours I've spent on her appointments? On her prescriptions, her... Stop, I cut in, my voice unwavering, though my heart pounded like thunder. Just stop lying. She turned on me like I'd slapped her. You're calling me a liar? After everything I've done for this family? What appointments had I demanded? I haven't seen a doctor in over a year. I couldn't afford the copays. Her mouth opened. Nothing came out. What prescriptions? I pressed. I've been splitting my pills in half for months just to make them last. Her color drained, but she tried to rally. You never said you were having trouble affording things? If you just communicated better. I did tell you. And the memories came rushing back. Sharp, vivid, undeniable. I called her last winter when I couldn't afford my blood pressure meds. She said she'd talk to Blaine. I texted her when my space heater broke, and I was shivering through the nights. She promised she'd handle it. I asked for help with groceries when my Social Security check was late. She said the family was going through a tight financial period. Blaine made a noise, low, pained, like someone had punched him. Tight financial period, he repeated. Seline, honey, I gave you access to a separate emergency fund for Mom, $25,000, replenished every year. That was for real emergencies, Seline shot back, her voice rising. Not every little complaint, every little complaint. I stared at her, and suddenly I didn't recognize her at all. Freezing during winter. Skipping medication. Those were little complaints to her. Trivial. You're being dramatic, Mom, she added, voice laced with condescension. You've always been dramatic. It's how you get attention. Her words weren't even the sharpest cut. What truly hurt, what left something fractured deep inside, was realizing that this was how she'd always seen me. Not as her mother, not even as a person, but as a burden, an inconvenience. Someone whose pain was suspicious, whose suffering was exaggerated. I saw Blaine pull out his phone. He moved with quiet precision, first calling his accountant, then his lawyer. His voice was low, clipped, professional. He spoke of audits, trust management, reallocations. Celine's posture faltered. You can't do this to me, she hissed at me while Blaine was still on the phone. I'm your daughter. You don't destroy family over money. You're right, I said softly. Family doesn't do that. But you stopped being family the day you decided money meant for my well-being was worth more than me. I kept you safe. I kept you housed, she said defensively. It's not like I threw you out. You kept me in a garage, Seline, a garage. While you lived in my house, used my money, and lied to your brother telling him I was fine. I paused, watching her. But that's not even the worst part, is it? She went still. The worst part is that you liked it. You enjoyed the power. You enjoyed being the gatekeeper. Every time Blaine asked about me, you got to shape the truth. You got to decide what I deserved, how much love, how much help. That's not true, she muttered, but there was no strength in it. Isn't it? I pressed. When I called you crying because I was lonely, did you tell him? When I asked if he could visit, did you pass it on? When I wondered why he seemed distant, did you explain you'd been screening every word that passed between us? Blaine ended his calls and turned back to us. His expression was unreadable, but the grief in his eyes was unmistakable. The trust fund is gone, he said quietly. So is the emergency account and the medical fund, every cent. That money was used appropriately, Seline protested, but her voice trembled. On what? Blaine asked flatly. Designer handbags, luxury cars, vacations. The shouting was growing louder. Mom had been surviving on just $800 a month from Social Security, while you burned through $50,000 a year, money that was meant for her care. I have expenses too, Seline snapped. I have a family, obligations. Blaine's voice was sharp. You have more money than you could ever spend in 10 lifetimes, and you're trying to justify this? Begrudge you? His voice rose, fiery with anger. You stole from our mother. You let her live in near poverty while you funded your lifestyle with money meant to protect and care for her. She doesn't need that much, Seline shot back, her tone shrill, defensive. Look at her. She's fine living simply. She doesn't need designer furniture or gourmet food or expensive doctors. Some people just don't need much. Low maintenance. The phrase landed on me like a punch to the gut, as if all my years of sacrifice, decades of putting my children's needs ahead of my own, had been some kind of proof that I didn't require comfort or care. As if accepting what little they gave me without protest meant I was naturally satisfied with less love, less attention, less dignity. Get out. My voice came out soft, but it stopped them both mid-argument. They turned toward me, startled. Seline, I said more firmly, get out of my house. She laughed, but the sound was brittle, teetering on the edge of hysteria. Your house? This isn't your house. This is Blaine's house. Everything here belongs to him. But Blaine's voice cut in, cool and certain. Not anymore. As of today, the deed is being transferred to Mom, along with full access to every account that should have been hers from the beginning. Celine's face drained of color. You can't do that. I have nowhere else to go. Marcus and I are separated. I don't have anywhere. You should have thought about that, Blaine said coldly, before you stole from the woman who gave up everything for you. I watched the realization settle on my daughter's face. For the first time in years, she couldn't twist the truth, couldn't lever our guilt or sentiment to get her way. She was finally cornered, about to lose everything she'd taken from me, and she knew it. That's when she finally showed her true self. Fine, she spat, her voice laced with venom. You want the truth? I'm glad I kept you away from Blaine. You would have been calling him all the time, begging for attention, making him feel guilty for his success. You're needy and pathetic, and you drain everyone around you. The words were meant to break me. Maybe they would have, just days ago. But sitting in that beautiful house, knowing at last that my son had tried to do right by me, and realizing that my pain had been fed by my daughter's greed and cruelty, I felt something I hadn't felt in years. Clarity. You're right about one thing, I said, rising slowly to my feet. I am needy. I need respect. I need honesty. I need to be treated like a human being who deserves dignity. I looked her squarely in the eyes. And since you can't offer me any of that, you're right. We're done. She stared at me like I was a stranger, and maybe in that moment, I was. The woman who had silently accepted crumbs and mistaken them for kindness was gone. In her place stood someone who finally understood her worth. I want you out of this house by the end of the week, I said evenly. And I never want to see you again. Mom, she gasped, you don't mean that. I'm your daughter. I took a breath, felt the truth of it settle deep in my bones. No, I said. A daughter doesn't do what you've done. You're a stranger to me, a stranger who shares my DNA. She turned to Blaine, hoping for support. But he didn't come to her rescue. He was looking at her like she was someone he didn't recognize anymore either. Blaine, she pleaded, you can't let her do this. I'm your sister. And she's my mother, he replied softly. The mother who sold her house so I could go to college. The mother who worked 3 jobs to make sure we had everything we needed. The mother who deserved better. From both of us. That was the moment Seline truly broke. Her mask crumbled, and she erupted. This is her fault, she screamed, pointing at me. She turned herself into some kind of martyr, always sacrificing, always suffering. She made us feel guilty just for having better lives. She did this to herself. The words echoed in the room, and the worst part? A part of me recognized their twisted truth. Yes, I had sacrificed everything. I had raised my children to believe their happiness came first, above my comfort, my health, even my pride. I had taught them without saying a word that my needs were secondary. And Seline, she'd taken that lesson and used it to justify her selfishness. Not with gratitude, not with empathy, but with entitlement. You're right, I said, and she blinked in surprise. I did teach you that my needs didn't matter, but you had a choice. You could have tried to give back. You could have made sure I was cared for the same way I cared for you. I walked to the window, looked out over the garden I hadn't been allowed to tend for years. But instead, you decided that my willingness to sacrifice meant I deserved to keep sacrificing. Forever. When I turned back, tears were rolling down her face, but they weren't remorseful. They were angry, furious, unyielding. I'll Fight the deed transfer, she snarled. I'll prove you're not mentally competent. I'll tell people the truth about you, that you're manipulative, that you need someone to control your life. Blaine stepped forward, and for the first time since this nightmare had begun, his calm turned sharp, dangerous. If you try to hurt her again and in any way, he said, you'll find out just how much power money really gives a person. Don't push me, Seline. She looked between us and saw something she couldn't fight, something stronger than her usual tactics. She backed up a step, grabbed her purse, and headed for the door. This isn't over, she hissed. But for me, watching her walk away, it finally was. 2 weeks later, the house was legally mine. I sat in the sunlit kitchen I had once only dreamed of entering, surrounded by boxes Blaine had brought in from the garage. My belongings, my life, no longer hidden away like an afterthought. The contrast was dizzying. From a hot plate and mini fridge to granite countertops and top-tier appliances. But the real transformation was in my relationship with my son. Blaine had taken a leave of absence from his company, something I never imagined he'd do. He visited daily, sometimes just to sit with me, sometimes to help with paperwork, or make calls to doctors and agencies. Slowly, we were relearning how to be family, without Seline in the way. I keep thinking about all those times I should have visited, he said one morning over breakfast. All the times I called Seline instead of just calling you. You trusted your sister, I told him. That's not a flaw. I should have seen something was wrong, he said quietly. The way you never asked for anything. Never complained, never even hinted that you needed help. That should have told me everything. He looked up at me with eyes full of guilt. But all I felt was peace. Because for the first time in a long, long time, I wasn't invisible. I was seen, and I was home. He understood his guilt. Of course he did. But there was something else, something deeper that he hadn't seen yet. And I did. Son, I said quietly, I raised you both to see me that way. He looked up from his coffee, puzzled. For years I made sure you thought I was unshakable, I went on, that I could take on anything. I taught you that I didn't need help, that your success was more important than my comfort. I built that image on purpose. His brows drew together. What do you mean? I'd been thinking about this ever since the confrontation with Seline, trying to piece together how much of what happened was shaped by patterns I had created, unintentionally but powerfully, back when Blaine was in college, working himself into the ground to keep up his grades and build his future. What did I say when you called home, worried about money? I asked. Blaine paused. You told me you were fine, that I didn't need to worry about things at home. And when Seline was struggling with her early career, spending more than she was making, what did I do? You helped her out, he said slowly. You said it was temporary. And when you finally became successful and offered to help me, I asked, what message did I send then? He was quiet for a long moment, looking down into his mug. That you didn't really need help, he said finally. That you were proud of managing on your own. I nodded. I taught you both that loving someone meant not burdening them with your problems, and that you shouldn't burden me with yours either. I truly believed I was doing the right thing, teaching you strength, teaching you independence. But Seline took that lesson and twisted it. She did, he agreed. But I built the foundation she used, I said, and reached across the table to take his hand. I'm not telling you this to absolve what she's done or to make you feel less angry about it. I'm saying it because I don't want to keep repeating those same mistakes in the future. Before he could respond, the doorbell rang. Through the front window, I spotted a young woman with dark hair, visibly nervous, shifting a large manila envelope from one hand to the other. When I opened the door, she introduced herself clearly and professionally. Mrs. Holloway, my name is Jennifer Martinez. I'm a private investigator. I'm working on a case that involves your daughter, Seline. May I come in? Blaine and I exchanged a wary glance. We hadn't heard a word from Seline since she'd left, though I had expected some kind of retaliation. Still, this wasn't what I'd anticipated. Jennifer took a seat in the living room but declined my offer of coffee. I've been hired by Marcus Chen, she began. Celine's husband. He's filing for divorce, and he suspects she's been hiding assets. What does that have to do with us? Blaine asked. Jennifer opened her envelope and pulled out a thick stack of papers. During the course of our investigation into Mrs. Chen's finances, we discovered some irregularities, things I believe you should be aware of. She spread the documents across my coffee table. Bank statements, investment summaries, property records. It was a lot. This, she said, pointing to one paper, is a savings account in your name, Mrs. Holloway. Are you aware of it? I leaned closer. The statement showed nearly 40,000 in the account. I shook my head. I've never seen this before, I said. It was opened 3 years ago, Jennifer explained. Seline is listed as the secondary account holder. The account has had regular deposits but no withdrawals at all. Blaine leaned forward and, what kind of deposits? Jennifer flipped through some pages. Social Security overpayments, Medicare reimbursements, and proceeds from a life insurance policy. My heart clenched. What life insurance policy? I asked, barely above a whisper. Jennifer carefully pulled another document from her folder. Your husband, Harold, had a small life insurance policy through his employer. When he passed, there was some confusion about the beneficiary information. The insurance company has spent the last 3 years trying to locate you. I stared blankly at the paper in her hands. But Harold died 15 years ago. His life insurance was paid out then. That's how I kept us afloat. This was a different policy, Jennifer said, a retirement benefit. It continued after his death. During a merger with another company, your case file was misplaced. When they finally located it, they sent the correspondence to an outdated address. I swallowed hard. So, where did the money go? Jennifer's tone grew more careful. To this account. It was opened by someone claiming to be your legal representative. The signature card lists Celine's name. Blaine scanned the papers, his expression darkening with each passing second. She's been collecting money that belonged to Mom for 3 years. It appears so, Jennifer confirmed. But here's the strange part. She never spent a dime of it. Every deposit has just been sitting there, accumulating interest. My mind was spinning. Why would she collect the money but not use it? I believe, Jennifer said gently, she was saving it for something very specific. Based on documents found among her personal files, it looks like she was preparing to have you declared legally incompetent, and this account would serve as evidence that she was managing your finances responsibly. The words hit me like a slap. My chest tightened. She was going to have me committed, I said, the horrifying realization blooming in my mind. The pieces fit now. It's possible, Jennifer admitted. She's been collecting documentation, notes about what she describes as concerning behavior, isolation, poor decision-making, difficulty managing finances. Blaine stood abruptly and walked to the window, hands clenched. The garage, he muttered. She kept Mom in the garage to make it seem like she couldn't live on her own. And she made sure I depended on her for everything, I added, feeling sick. Every time I called her for help with a bill or asked her to schedule a doctor's appointment, she was recording it as proof that I was declining, that I couldn't function independently. Jennifer nodded. According to Mr. Chen, there are also records of conversations with elder care attorneys, inquiries into private facilities. She was methodically preparing a case. It was far beyond simple theft. This wasn't just about money anymore. Seline had been laying the groundwork to take away my autonomy entirely. But she never went through with it, Blaine said suddenly, turning to face us. No, Jennifer agreed, and I think I know why. She pulled out one last document. 3 months ago, Seline hired a private investigator to look into your finances, Mr. Holloway. It seems she was trying to assess what assets she could access if she were named your mother's legal guardian. Blaine stiffened. She was planning to come after my money, too. It's a possibility, Jennifer said. In many states, if a parent is declared incompetent and a child becomes their guardian, that guardian can file legal claims against other family members to help cover ongoing care expenses. I sank back into the couch, overwhelmed and disoriented. My daughter hadn't just stolen from me. She had been preparing to steal everything. My freedom, my dignity, my very identity as a capable adult. She had been constructing this plan for years, carefully orchestrating every conversation, every gesture, every interaction to support a narrative she would eventually use against me. One that threatened not only my autonomy, but potentially even the relationship I had with my son. Every moment had been deliberate, a subtle piece in a strategy I hadn't seen until it was too late. There's something else, Jennifer said, her voice calm but firm. The original reason Mr. Chen hired me, Celine's been moving money into accounts using a different last name, her maiden name. She paused before continuing. Your maiden name, Mrs. Holloway. The implication landed hard. Jennifer explained further on, she's been building a financial paper trail, constructing a profile that paints her as your longtime financial representative. Identity theft, Blaine muttered darkly, his jaw tight. And more, Jennifer added. Dr. Chen believes she was preparing to claim a substantial portion of your assets in the divorce, stating that they rightfully belong to her as your caregiver and financial proxy. I looked around the house I'd been living in, but only just realized was truly mine. The beautifully curated rooms, the quiet order of it all. My mind reeled back to the garage, the cramped space I'd spent 3 years in under the illusion of care. The breadth of Celine's deception, the precision of her cruelty, was stunning. "What happens now?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. Jennifer didn't hesitate. "The $40,000 currently in that account is legally yours. And based on what we've uncovered so far, Celine could be facing criminal charges for financial elder abuse, identity theft, and fraud." Blaine moved closer, gently taking the seat next to me. "Mom, son," he said, steady and grounded, "this is your choice to make. But she has to face consequences for what she's done." My thoughts drifted back to the woman who raised me with the unspoken rule that loyalty to family meant enduring whatever treatment came your way. For so long, I had made excuses for Celine's coldness. I had convinced myself she was simply pragmatic, that she was just being protective of her brother. Now I saw clearly. I thought about what those last 3 years could have looked like if I had access to the resources that had been rightfully mine, the medical care I had forgone, the basic dignity I'd been denied. And I thought about others, other elderly parents with no one like Blaine to advocate for them. Mothers trapped in worse conditions, stripped of everything by the very children they once nurtured. "I want to press charges," I said quietly but without hesitation. "All of them." Jennifer gave a small nod and began taking notes. "There's something else you need to know," she added. "Based on what we found in her files, you weren't the only one she was targeting." A chill crawled up my spine. "What do you mean?" "She's been in contact with elder law attorneys, multiple ones. Correspondence about other elderly individuals. I think she was preparing to expand this operation." The revelation hit me like a punch to the chest. Celine hadn't just betrayed her own mother. She had been preparing to turn this into a systematic, repeatable scheme, an entire business model built on preying upon the vulnerable. And yet, even in that moment of deep betrayal, something unexpected stirred in me. Purpose. For the first time in years, I had something to do, something meaningful, something that mattered beyond my own survival. I would ensure Celine never had the opportunity to do this to anyone else. 6 months later, I was standing in my garden clipping dead blooms from the roses I'd finally had the time and space to plant. The morning air was crisp, the sun gently warming my back. The feel of dirt under my fingernails felt luxurious, almost indulgent, something I hadn't experienced in far too long. The legal process had moved quickly once all the evidence was brought forward. Celine pled guilty to financial elder abuse, identity theft, and fraud. She was sentenced to 3 years in prison, and the court ordered full restitution, not just to me, but also to 2 other elderly individuals she had tried to exploit through shady care facilities she'd been corresponding with. The judge had delivered a searing rebuke during sentencing. "This wasn't just theft of money," she said. "This defendant stole dignity, peace of mind, and independence from people who trusted her." I had attended the hearing, not to gloat, not out of anger, but because I needed to see the end of the story with my own eyes. Celine looked smaller somehow in her orange prison uniform. Older. She met my gaze just once. For a brief moment, something flickered in her eyes, maybe regret, maybe resentment that she'd been caught. I gave her a small nod, not forgiveness, just recognition. She would always be my daughter, biologically. But the relationship I had spent 65 years trying to sustain was truly finally over. The hardest part wasn't the trial or even the attention the case had attracted. It was the strange silence that came after, the quiet peace that replaced the constant hum of anxiety that had defined my life for so long. I had lived for years under the shadow of fear. Fear of being evicted, fear of a medical emergency I couldn't afford, fear of being a burden. Even when I thought I was being cared for, I'd felt how close I was to losing everything. Now, for the first time, my finances were secure. My bond with Blaine was healing, honest, and open. I was learning how to plan for something more than just survival. I'd enrolled in a master gardener program at the local community college. I joined a book club at the library. And yes, at 65, I had started dating again, something that felt equal parts exhilarating and terrifying. Robert was a retired teacher I'd met in my gardening class, a widower with a gentle way about him and a wry sense of humor. We were taking things slow, coffee after class, strolls through botanical gardens, conversations about our children and grandchildren. Yes, grandchildren. That was perhaps the most astonishing part of everything that had unfolded. Blaine had been married for 8 years to a woman named Sarah. I'd only met her once, briefly at their wedding, another interaction, carefully limited by Seline. But now Sarah and I were rebuilding our own relationship. Sarah was warm and bright, a pediatric nurse with kind eyes and a laugh that made you feel immediately welcome. She was also 7 months pregnant with my first grandchild. I feel terrible that we didn't include you more, Sarah had said one evening over dinner as we began to truly get to know each other. Seline always said you liked your space, that you found family gatherings overwhelming. I'd opened my mouth to offer a familiar excuse, the old instinct to smooth things over surfacing like a reflex, but Blaine had gently interjected. Seline lied about a lot of things, he said simply. We're starting over. And we were. They included me in everything now. Doctor's appointments, shopping for the baby, even painting the nursery. I was learning about my son's life in ways I'd never been allowed to before. The pressures of his job, his fears about becoming a father, his quiet grief over the years we'd lost to Celine's manipulation. I keep thinking about all the conversations we should have had, he told me one afternoon as we assembled a white crib in the baby's room. All the times I should have just called you myself instead of going through Seline. And now we finally could. The doorbell rang just as I was lost in thoughts about my garden. I brushed the dirt off my hands and made my way to the front door, expecting Robert with the Chinese takeout we'd planned for lunch. But it wasn't Robert. Standing on the porch was a young woman holding a baby carrier. Mrs. Holloway, I'm Amanda Chen, she said, Marcus's sister. My heart tightened. Marcus, Celine's ex-husband. I'd heard through court documents that they had a child together. Amanda shifted the carrier so I could see inside. This is Emma, she said, your granddaughter. I stared at the sleeping toddler. Even in sleep, I saw hints of Seline in her tiny face, but softened somehow, untouched by bitterness. There was an innocence there that felt fragile and pure. She couldn't have been more than 18 months old, with dark curls framing her round cheeks. Marcus wanted you to meet her, Amanda said. He told me she deserves to know her grandmother, no matter what happened with Seline. My throat tightened, a lump forming as I tried to speak. How is she? I managed. She's doing well. Marcus has full custody now, Amanda said gently. He's a good dad. She hesitated, then handed me a white envelope. My name was written on the front in neat, unfamiliar handwriting. He also wanted you to have this. I looked at the envelope for a moment before returning my gaze to Emma. May I hold her? I asked. Amanda smiled warmly and lifted the child out with practiced care, passing her into my arms. Emma stirred as I cradled her, her eyes opening slowly, dark and serious as they fixed on my face. Hello, sweetheart, I whispered, brushing a curl from her forehead. I'm your grandma, Janine. Emma studied me like she was trying to memorize my features. Then wordlessly, she reached out one tiny hand and pressed it to my cheek. Later, after Amanda and Emma had gone, promising more visits, I sat in the living room with Marcus's letter in my hands. I opened it slowly, already bracing myself for whatever might be inside. Dear Mrs. Holloway, I want you to know I had no idea what Seline was doing to you. If I had, I would have stepped in right away. I'm writing because I want to ask if you'd consider being part of Emma's life. She deserves to know her grandmother, and you deserve to know her. Seline will only have supervised visits after her release, but I want Emma surrounded by people who will treat her with kindness and respect. Looking back, some of Celine's actions toward you make more sense now, considering how she treated Emma and me. She was controlling, manipulative, emotionally abusive. For years, I made excuses, told myself she was just under pressure, overwhelmed. Emma and I are in therapy, learning better ways of living, of loving. If you're open to it, we'd really like for you to be part of that healing journey. Sincerely, Marcus. I folded the letter carefully, sitting still with the weight of his words. I thought about the patterns that weave through families, the damage that gets passed on like old furniture, generation after generation, unless someone decides to break the cycle. Seline had inherited something from me, the instinct to sacrifice, but she'd turned that instinct into something sharp and self-serving. She learned how to manipulate guilt and loyalty to get her way, twisting the very qualities that could have made her compassionate into tools of control. But Emma didn't have to inherit that. She could grow up in a new pattern, one built on value, not obligation, one where love was steady and respectful, not contingent on what she could give in return. She could learn that real love doesn't demand the surrender of dignity or autonomy. That evening, Blaine and Sarah came by for dinner. Sarah was moving slower now, her pregnancy nearing its end, but she still insisted on helping me in the kitchen. As we chopped vegetables for the stir-fry, I shared the news. I found out something surprising today, I said, peeling a carrot. I have another grandchild. They both paused. I told them about Amanda's visit, about Emma, about the letter from Marcus. How do you feel about it? Sarah asked softly. I thought about it while slicing the carrots into thin coins. Hopeful, I said at last. That little girl deserves more than the legacy Seline would have left her. Maybe I can help with that. Blaine nodded thoughtfully. You're good at raising kids who know how to love. I smiled, but it faded as I replied. I made mistakes with you and Seline. I taught you both, in different ways, that my needs didn't matter. I looked at Blaine. Seline used that to excuse cruelty. You used it to justify distance. Neither one is healthy. So what will you teach Emma? Sarah asked, curiosity and warmth in her voice. I pictured Emma's wide, serious eyes, the way her hand had found my face without hesitation. That she's worthy just as she is. That the people who love her will show up for her, not because they have to, but because they want to. That asking for help isn't weakness, and giving help isn't sacrifice, it's love in motion. After dinner, we sat out back to watch the sunset. Sarah reclined with her feet up, one hand resting over the curve of her belly. Blaine was reading work emails, but he kept setting his phone down to join in our conversation. Out of nowhere, I found myself speaking. I've been thinking about forgiveness. They both looked at me. Not forgiving Seline, I clarified quickly. I'm not ready for that. I might never be. I mean forgiving myself. Blaine tilted his head. For what? For the years I believed I wasn't worth more. For teaching my children that love means accepting whatever treatment you get. For staying silent when I knew something was wrong. Sarah reached out and took my hand gently. You survived, she said. That's enough. But I knew that wasn't all. I hadn't just survived, I'd started to live. At 65, I was learning how it felt to breathe without fear, to make choices not out of duty, but desire. My garden was thriving now. Roses, lavender, herbs I used in cooking. My house felt like mine, not a borrowed space. My bank account could support not just my needs, but also small indulgences. Books, fresh flowers, good coffee. But the real luxury? Peace. The quiet in my mind, the absence of that ever-present anxiety I used to mistake for normalcy. The deep, unshakable knowing that I was safe, that I was loved, and that I was free. As Blaine and Sarah left, Blaine pulled me into a tight hug. I love you, Mom, he said. I should have said that more often. You're saying it now, I told him. That's what matters. Later, I moved through my house slowly, turning off lights, checking locks. Those rituals of safety I was still learning to trust. In my bedroom, I found the small, framed photo Blaine had given me holding him as a newborn, my face glowing with joy. For years, I'd looked at that photo and only seen the cost, what I gave up, the years ahead where I'd put my children first and forget my own needs. But now I saw something else entirely. I saw a woman full of love, a woman with fierce strength she hadn't yet discovered, a woman who would survive whatever came her way. I was still that woman, 65 years old, free, with grandchildren to love, a garden to tend, and for the first time in decades, a future that truly belonged to me. It had taken me a lifetime to learn that I was worth fighting for, but I had learned it in time for it to matter. And that, as I switched off the bedside lamp, was enough.